guys, hello and welcome to the Guest Life Podcast. We have a special guest today. It is episode 40. Before we get started, guys, we just want to thank everybody for tuning in. We wouldn't be here without our listeners and people within the city that are, tuning in and getting some value. And obviously our great guest. Today we have Keanin Loomis. Keanin Loomis he's a husband, he's a father of three, he's a proud Hamiltonian. Prior to moving to Hamilton, he was a lawyer in Washington, D.C. that we're going to get into a little bit. He's the former president and CEO of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and he is officially a candidate for the mayor of Hamilton in 2022 Hamilton Municipal Election. So we're so excited to have you, Keanin, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. I don't know how I'm a special guest and yet I'm number 40. Like how did that happen?
we work our way up. First
Okay.
it was friends and family. You know what I mean? Then it's it's big people in the city kind of getting their name out and getting it going.
This is exciting. Thanks for having me.
Keanin, I've known professionally. He actually, back when I first started, we won a chamber award and he handed me an award. I remember, I'll never forget. He said, "Man, you got a nice suit for being a plumber." And I said, "Yeah, we try to clean up nice. I only got one. So, it's not a day-to-day thing." But
you got many more than that now.
Yeah, I've got a few now. They changed because I don't wear them as often, but kind of getting involved is big. So, so Keanan's got an incredible story. I was fortunate enough to work with him professionally, as well as know him personally. He lives around the corner from my house downtown Hamilton. Keanan, thanks for being here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's rock and roll.
That's it. So tell us a little bit about, usually what we do in the podcast, we start from the end, we go to the now. Tell us a little bit about your start. How'd you become a lawyer? How'd you get into politics?
Well, I still can't believe that I'm actually in politics. First of all, I bristle at the fact that I am, I guess, by definition now, a politician.
Yeah.
But it's something I never really expected, although I've always loved politics. I've always loved government. When I was a kid, I was just such a government dork. I remember in 1984, following the Mondale-Reagan race. Reagan was running for re-election, and I was just really, really, super interested in that. And I was 9 years old, and my mother was like, "Who are you?" Like, honestly, I was the apple that fell furthest from the tree.
Really?
When it comes to where I came from. But, I took political science in university at Waterloo, which is where I met my wife, who's from Hamilton. That's how we're here. That's the short answer to the question of how did you end up in Hamilton?
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to law school down in Virginia at the College of William and Mary. A lot of people know I'm originally from the U.S. and I was brought to Canada when I was 12, against my own volition. My mother got remarried and my stepdad is a teacher in London. And so I always wanted to return to the U.S. and, I saw law school as my first opportunity to do that and to get to Washington, D.C., where, that's where, to me, that was Mecca. That was where, that's where the center of the universe when it comes to political junkies. And so I did that. And I realized, first of all, I always thought that government service was a higher calling. And
yeah,
you get really disabused of that notion very quickly.
Yeah.
When you're in Washington, D.C. and you're mired in the quote unquote swamp. And I can say that because it actually is a swamp. Washington is, and certainly in August, it feels like it.
Yeah.
But as well, like I underwent a transformation myself. First of all, it didn't work out. I didn't love practicing law.
Yeah.
And I realized that was not a sustainable career path for me, especially with two small kids at the time. And I also came to the realization that I'm more Canadian than I am American. And finally, I needed to understand that and come to that conclusion myself. And that's when I decided, well, if this isn't going to work out and I'm going to switch careers, this is probably the right time as well to come back to Canada and be closer to our families. And that's how we landed in Hamilton. With my in-laws, they said, well, you can, live with us while you figure it out. And I really fell in love with Hamilton very quickly. So much so that very soon after we moved here, I said to my wife, because there was a lot of what are we doing here? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And I said, what about Hamilton? And she said, well, I can't really repeat it here, but she was like, "Are you bleeping kidding me?" Like, she never expected that, that would come out of my mouth. And,
Really?
And when she left Hamilton in '95, she was never coming back. There was a whole generation of people who are like that, right?
Totally.
I talked her into it. I said, if you saw what I was seeing, like, a lot of green shoots were happening at that time on James North. And if you met the people I was meeting, and that was the big difference between, Washington, D.C. and Hamilton, or, Toronto and Hamilton, which is, I thought Toronto was really going to be my only place to find my next opportunity. And she said, "All right, well, you better make this work." And so, here I am 13 years later.
Yeah.
Well, no pressure. Yeah. The pressure being, of course, like, you got two small kids to feed, and I didn't have a job. We were basically, homeless. We were living in my in-laws' basement at the age of 35. And there's a lot of pressure associated with that as well. But, that's why Hamilton's been, so amazing. That journey from there to here. I can't believe it's only taken 13 years. And what I have found is that, my vocation is leader. And that's ultimately what, going to law school and having that background really helped with that. Mm-hmm. But all along the way, I realize now, because you can, even though I was like the 12th man on the bench in high school basketball, I was seen as being one of the leaders, of that team, because that's just like, I just gravitated towards that. And so, here I am in this community.
Yeah.
Doing that. And I see the obvious need at this point in time for real leadership in City Hall to be able to meet a lot of the challenges and the great opportunities that we have as a city. And I just felt, too compelled to watch this pass me by and not have the opportunity that I have at this point in time, not take advantage of it. I wouldn't have been able to, I say I wouldn't have been able to look at myself in the mirror if I just, continued to do what I was doing comfortably in the Chamber of Commerce, because I had been there 10 years.
Yeah.
And watch, this election play out without my participation.
That's amazing, man. And, to talk about the journey from those big moments and big moves, obviously, going to Washington, D.C. to study law, right? And then making the decision to move back to Hamilton and start a family here, right? It must be humbling, I'm sure, when you make those decisions, and especially like, saying like, there is no quit. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely uncomfortable. Like, I've always been comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think that's ultimately the case. What you need to be able to say, all right, I'm going to, move now. I'm going to go to Waterloo instead of, why not go to Western? Because that's, where my family lived. No, I want to chart my own path. And, university is an opportunity for me to restart my life. And then, coming down to Virginia for law school, that's a new adventure, right? And
were you by yourself, or were you with your wife at the time?
Well, so we were dating in Waterloo. It was after my first term of law school where I realized we can't do this long distance thing. So I proposed to her during Christmas of my first year when I was back here in Canada. And then we got married within 5 months after that, so that she could then accompany me down to the U.S. And going through all of that whole process, the immigration process was long and tough. But she came down with me to start my second year. And it was just before 9/11, and I remember that very clearly. She was still, in the house, and it couldn't work, and then all of a sudden I was like, wow, what have I brought her into?
Challenging
by
for
living
sure.
down here, and we were very close, of course, obviously even to the Pentagon. So, but anyway, and then moving to Northern Virginia, and that was ultimately following a dream, and being able to work in Washington. But yeah, I think the real leap was in leaving that all behind and in restarting. And, we had obviously a great amount of, familiarity with Canada, but we didn't really have a network here. Mm-hmm. We just had a lot of friends and family, who we'd gone to Waterloo with and all that. And so it was basically starting over. And, I knew nobody in Hamilton other than my in-laws. And so But that's when I really dived right in, you know, and really, I'm naturally an introvert, and I realized that an introvert is not going to get a job, you know. But you know, what is required right now is hustling and meeting people and going to networking events and really just putting myself out there. And that was just like, that was a massive leap for me. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was wearing a parachute, you know. And so now I know that, and that's what makes this leap so much easier. And I know that things are going to turn out okay, regardless of how what the outcome is. And the great thing is that regardless of the outcome, I will not regret this, because it has been an amazing journey, and just being a candidate and being out there and experiencing the city in a whole new way, and meeting a whole new range of people outside of just, you know, the more narrow slice of the community that I was very actively engaged with, you know, being the business community. So it has been already a rewarding experience.
Yeah. And talking about like what you've done for the chamber and kind of, you know, the journey, and as we've been involved with the chamber for 7 years now, and seeing like how it's developed and how it's grown, and, you know, talking about being an introvert, it's like, you know, I'm an extrovert that in a different setting, I'm an introvert, I guess you could say, but, you know, getting into that space where you do know nobody, you're not from the city, to becoming the leader of all business, or most business within the city as the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Tell us a little bit about that, and kind of, you know, what drove you to want that type of success.
Well, my first opportunity when I arrived in Hamilton was to become I became the chief operating officer for Innovation Factory, which is at McMaster Innovation Park. And it was a new organization that was being created to serve the entrepreneurs in this community that were developing their own intellectual property, and to be a Mars or a Communitech, but for Hamilton. And so that's where, you know, my legal background really did help. They needed somebody to do the grunt work that, you know, the province required. The province was providing a whole lot of money, but they needed basically to have like a very thick application filled out to qualify for the funding. And part of it was getting to know, like doing a lot of the statistical work in terms of figuring out where Hamilton's best opportunities are economically, where the people who are developing the intellectual property in this town, where are they? Getting all of the various stakeholders on board, or they don't know they're stakeholders, but they're stakeholders to us, right? McMaster, Mohawk, the business community, Hamilton Economic Development, and the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. And so my job was to build out those relationships and to help get that organization up and running. And so I became very much a community-facing role with that organization, and getting very involved with the Chamber of Commerce. And at that time, you know, getting involved with it, and really meeting the people that were associated with it, I thought, you know, it doesn't really meet my expectations in terms of what, you know, a Chamber of Commerce should be in a community like this at a time like this. Mm-hmm. And so that was a big thing for me when I got the offer to do this. I felt like, you know, a chamber is something that, you know, your grandfather belongs to or your dad belongs to. Is this something really that I can make an impact with, and is this the right fit for me? But it was an opportunity to elevate my leadership journey in this community, to run an organization that was, you know, should be super impactful in this community if it's doing the right things. Totally. And so I said, yeah, like, and to have that freedom, you know, there were a lot of new hires that were required. So like I had this organization that was, at this point in time, it was like 166 years old. But that it was almost a clean slate because of the opportunity to make 3 new hires right away. Yeah. And so I thought, well, you know, I could basically run my own shop here in this community and really make it the advocacy organization that that this community needs, and that other chambers of commerce throughout, ultimately what I found was, you know, other chambers and other organizations throughout, you know, North America and in particular Canada, that were having significant impacts within their community. And so I brought in a lot of those models into Hamilton, and then made a Made in Hamilton sort of advocacy group, by bringing in so many amazing, talented people, not just, within the organization itself, but on the board, in governance roles and as volunteers as well. And, lo and behold, like, we had over the last decade a tremendous impact in this community. So I'm really proud of first and foremost the evolution of the organization into being this really relevant, modern, and probably one of the most progressive organizations in the entire Canadian Chamber network. Yeah. And then, so that was really important. Just the health of the organization. It's now super healthy, a good amount of reserves, great people, on staff and around the board, and that organization, is going to flourish, especially now that I'm gone, right? Like now it's like ready to go to the next level and
set it up for success.
Yeah, exactly. But just the various things that we were involved with, like LRT, obviously, is the one most people know us for. But I was also, what I loved was being able to now, within this very traditional organization, help people understand why the creative industries are so important, why transit is so important, why inclusivity and equity is so important in our community, why cannabis is so important to our economy as well. This great opportunity that we have that ultimately, there was a moment in time where City Council almost turned down the opportunity to legally sell cannabis here in this city. And so we would have basically had the status quo, all these illegal shops. And not only that, but we would have had a whole bunch of companies that have now set up here in Hamilton basically say, why would we bother? Why would we invest in Hamilton and our production facilities and hire people in Hamilton when we're not even welcome to sell here legally? And so it's just little things like that. It's developing regional relationships, and not just with KW, not just with Toronto and all of those communities that are part of the GTHA, but also with Buffalo and a community that we share so much in common with, and it's just 45 minutes away, and it still baffles me why we don't have more a better relationship with that community. So, I think building out all of that and leaving the organization in a good spot and being able to know that I didn't overstay my welcome. There's an expiration for every job.
Totally.
And, so I'm glad I got out when I did. It was the right thing to do for me and for the organization and for the broader business community here in Hamilton.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, because I think, for all the reasons that you just explained, it just makes so much sense to understand and making that impact. And, I have a book up behind you. It's a Good to Great. And, they talk about that with like, is it a good leader or is it a great leader? And great leaders, when they leave organizations, the lifeblood of the organization has a heartbeat. Yeah. And that context goes far past just one person. Right, it's setting up the culture for success and processes and everything. So, me being still part of the chamber, I'm on the board. I have the opportunity to see that growth and see like kind of the footprint that you've put together. So we want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And it comes a long way, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not one person can lead, right? But for that consistency, what happens when that person's gone, or what happens when that person leaves? And I think in business, and a lot of entrepreneurs listening, you want to set yourself up so that what happens if you're not there anymore, or what happens if you want to be on vacation, if you want to be, separated a little bit from your business or get a little bit of downtime. I know a lot of people don't get that, that opportunity, but.
Well, so one of the things is a lot of like, so if you fail, guest plumbing, fails and it goes under, but it hasn't been in existence for too long. The big pressure was the Chamber of Commerce had been in existence for 165 years or whatever,
Totally.
older than the city itself. And so there's a lot more pressure there. But also you get a good understanding of, I am just but a blip in the history of this organization, right? And so I've always borrowed Bob Young's line about how he's the caretaker of the Ticats, and that was such a great way of being able to see that in the chamber itself. And I always say, and this is why this is what I'm trying to sell, quote unquote, over the course of this campaign, is that if I can do in the mayor's office what I did in the chamber, this city will be much better off.
Yeah, so getting into that concept, obviously, running for mayor is massive.
Yeah.
So proud of you for making those decisions to jump into that. I'm sure that can be overwhelming, especially there's only so many spots, there's only so many candidates that run, and we're behind you 100%. So what are some of the platforms? What are some of the initiatives they're going to be using going forward? What's kind of your claim to fame here?
Yeah, well, so bringing real leadership to City Hall, real change, not just change for change's sake. We're hearing from so many people. They have the same sort of desire that I had and that I intuited, and I'm now feeling that across the entire community. And so focusing, as I did at the chamber, on culture change within that organization is going to be my number one priority, because we have an incredible opportunity this year with at least 6 new councilors. And so with a new mayor, we're going to have at least 7 new faces around this 16-person board that is, the directors of the corporation of the city of Hamilton. And so, if you can't do it now, it's going to be impossible. And I refuse to believe that it is impossible to change the culture of the city. And then once you get the culture of the city right, then you can really address all those other issues, the challenges and the opportunities. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the details, we've made an announcement about a month ago to build 50,000 new homes in Hamilton over the next 10 years, because affordability is one of the biggest issues that everybody is facing in this community. And we know in particular when it comes to housing, that supply is the biggest driver of that on affordability. And so we need to build more homes here in Hamilton over the next 10 years. And in fact, we need to build enough to be able to be that city of 800,000 people by 2050 that the province is requiring us to plan for. So that's number one. But it also comes to some of the more popular type of campaign platform promises, which is to fix the roads. That was just one thing, that knocking on doors, going to events, meeting the thousands of new Hamiltonians that I've met over the course of the last couple of months. Everybody, it doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how rich you are, whether you're driving a clunker like me around town, fix the roads. It's so frustrating, right? And it's so, and the issue is, it's not just, a manifestation of just poor roads that, we have to try to avoid, and swerve out of the way to avoid. It's a symptom of a deeper problem, which is that, the city auditor put out a report last year that outlined 25 things that we could be doing better when it comes to the procurement of our roads. We're accepting shoddy work from contractors. And we know it's shoddy at that moment because we're actually testing it and it's not meeting our standards. And yet we accept it, we pay them, and we invite them to bid on the next project. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely ludicrous to me. So just in a way in which we could be doing such a better job when it comes to the procurement of our roads, such that we get now 15 years of life out of something as opposed to 5 years that we're getting right now. And you just think about it, that's just one narrow thing. It's a big one, but narrow thing that the city is procuring and involved in our daily lives. And so, we need to obviously just run that organization better. And be able to tell the taxpayers that your money, we pay high taxes in this community. Your money is being spent wisely, and right now everybody knows that it's not. And so that was very, very well received as well. But this morning I was privileged to be able to finally reveal our final platform. We had an outline, 4 buckets: restoring truth, trust, and transparency to City Hall, growing Hamilton Hamilton smartly, a more responsive city hall, and then a safe, clean, and healthy Hamilton. Those were our four platform pillars. But we said, here's kind of the overarching, principles that we're bringing to this campaign. But we're now going out and we're asking you, help us further refine this. And so today, after having those, thousands of conversations and the input from so many Hamiltonians from all over the city, we were able to, announce, some of the key planks to that platform. I'm focused on economic development. Everybody knows that that's where I come from, and that's where I'm most comfortable. But following on to the announcement of creating 50,000 new homes in Hamilton, the next question is, where are those people going to work, right? So that's what we announced today. And it's been like little things like spending $1 million, or increasing the budget of Hamilton Economic Development Department by $1 million, because we were hearing about all these businesses that are so interested in coming to Hamilton because they're hearing all this buzz as well. But there's these bottlenecks happening within the bureaucratic process. So we need to remove those bottlenecks. Just a variety of things that we've put out, like I said, big or small, that are going to help us get to that vision that I have of Hamilton in 2050, city of 800,000 people, 5 transit lines, reaching into every corner of this community.
Yeah.
And I think about my kids who will be, in their 20s and 30s at that point in time. I want them out of my house. So, this is why we got to create these homes.
Yeah.
I want them to have a great job opportunity. And, I really do think about how they're going to be interacting with their community and moving about their city. And really, that's for me what it's all about. And I think that's what leadership is all about. It's looking beyond the next election cycle and the next election cycle after that, and and really focusing on the long term, because that is what this city has been missing, and what has really held us back.
Yeah, man, it's a lot to take in, and really like a lot of planning goes into what you guys are talking about in terms of looking a little bit further than that. And I think it goes when you talk about entrepreneurship and business and leadership. We use a platform called EOS, and they put me as the visionary, and the visionary's role is to look past the day-to-day and past the month-to-month and past what are we doing 5-10 years down the road, and it all sets yourself up for success. And sometimes you can feel like you're kind of just keep hitting these roadblocks when the vision isn't aligned. Right. Yeah. It's like taking a zigzag to the end of the line instead of, being a sniper and going right to the wall. Yeah. I think it's so interesting, especially when you're talking about different facets of it. For the people listening, if you haven't thought about how a city's developed, like think about a subway system, right? Yeah. Like think about a metropolitan. And also, I know being a Hamiltonian and moving our business is starting to work into Toronto, and you hear about the challenges from people from Hamilton going to work in Toronto. Like the traffic's getting crazy, but you don't hear about that in Toronto. Torontonians don't talk about the traffic in Toronto because they're not in cars, right? They're on those subway systems, or they're on the transit systems, and they're not. They're working near where they live or close to where they live or on a transit line. And I think it's so important. It's like, well, who thought of that?
Yeah, exactly. You take it for granted that these things were just here. They've always been here. But there were people that made those decisions way back when. Yeah. And, and they probably toiled and spent, years, trying to get these things through. And now, so I always say this about the LRT. It's going to cause a lot of pain. It's going to be it's going to be inconvenient for sure. Totally. But when it's done, everybody will say they were for it all along, because it's going to be amazing. and my kids in 2050, like they'll know, obviously because they lived through, my advocacy for this project. But other kids who are riding around in 2050, they, will be, well, I hope not to be long gone, but they won't be thinking about the us or this. It will just be like, of course we should have this, and totally. It just makes sense that this is Hamilton.
100%. And like it takes a visionary like yourself to kind of make those things happen and put those things in place. Yeah, because it takes time, right? It takes time, takes energy, takes if you want to do construction on roads and housing, you need contracts. with good contractors or employees and tradespeople within the industries, because again, you're bringing jobs into the city, right? You want to build the homes, you want to build the place to live, you need the people to do it, and we see that a lot in our industry. I'm sure you've heard. But yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about, obviously, I've noticed that anybody's lately following you on Instagram and all of the social platforms, you're everywhere. You seem to be everywhere, every day, every time. So
I'm not leaving one vote on the table.
Yeah, no. And I'm sure it's done wonders for your campaign on the sense of you really understanding what the people are looking for by talking to the people. You can't assume, you can't talk to just the businesses or just, people on the street. You have to get a general consensus of what does the city need as a whole. And I think that's, you made a great point earlier about, well, you've talked to the businesses, that, but you've been really hitting the pavement. So How do you balance, we always get to this question at the end, and how do you balance that work-life balance, if there is one? Me personally at this time, I'm not that balanced. I'm a little even kiltered, but when it comes to, obviously you've got events in the evening, you've got events during the day, you've obviously got a family. I think right now during campaign season, it's probably business first, family second, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, balance has always been hard for sure. The chamber was a pretty big job as well, and a lot of events. My wife has a big job herself, right? And so we've relied on a lot of help from our family. And now our kids are at an age where, they're easier. We've gotten through that very much more difficult early years stage. But it's still really, really difficult. And especially now, we knew it was going to be crazy, and so you just accept it. It's hopefully, short term, although, if I become mayor, then all of a sudden, it's also, that's going to be huge, but it feels like it's going to be a little bit more stable than, campaigning. But I think that, right now, that is the most difficult part. People have asked me, what's the hardest part of campaigning? It's actually living up to all of my duties as a husband, as a father, as I was saying the VP finance and facilities of the Loomis household. It's hard to do all of that stuff. And as we were talking before, right now, so it's like, okay, now with the kids, getting to school, those things you still have to do those things, right?
Of course.
And the lunches and, just maintaining the household and try to figure out how to get the laundry done and, when you have it, when you can. I have no idea how I'm going to get leaves done this year. I think it's just I'm going to have to leave them until after the election. And if I win, I might have to hire somebody. I have no idea. These are the things that are on my mind. But as we were talking, right now, we have a dishwasher on the fritz and a fridge on the fritz. And I'm I just do not have the time to deal with this at this moment. And so, we will just keep, I don't know, but you just do. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You have no idea how you're going to get through life as a parent until you have kids. And at first it seems so overwhelming, but then you get into, a routine and a rhythm. And, so we've gotten into a little bit of a rhythm with the campaign. I hope it doesn't it's not going to be routine, right? It'll be over as of October, but if I'm successful, we will find a new rhythm and routine and we'll just make it work. And that's just the point. You just do, you figure it out. Maybe you sleep less, maybe, you cut, I hope not to cut, going to the gym or workouts, but that might have to be the case. I have no idea, but I'll make it work.
That's awesome. I love hearing it because everybody's got a different concept, different story, different, and different focus at different times. And I think throughout people's careers, they evolve, right? And understand that, this might be a little bit of a challenge now, but you can create a new habit and you're able to, kind of master that and go to the next challenge, right? So we finish the podcast this again. We're very fortunate to have you here. Episode 40. What advice would you give to your younger self? Younger Keanin, going through the ranks, moving on up. What advice would you give yourself?
I would say, so I have no regrets, despite not being a lawyer and having gone through law school, and I'm still paying off law school loans, so I'm reminded every month of that. I have no regrets. Like it was all worth it. I think that the big piece of advice I'd give myself is that the hard work will eventually pay off, and you don't see the reward right away. But it wasn't until, again, I was probably when I started at the chamber and started to hit my stride at the chamber, probably 2-3 years in, where I'm like, okay, I got this job. I figured out the organization. We're improving as an organization, both financially and our reach in terms of advocacy and impact in the community. And I'm hitting my stride personally as well. Like that's when I finally realized. That's when I finally felt like I had figured it out, and I was 40, like that, and that's kind of late in life, right? But you think about it. I always thought, I'd love to be a millionaire by 30. Well, I wasn't, and I'm not, and nowhere close. But I have, if you just put in the work, if you, not go with the flow, but make your own flow, eventually it's going to pay off. And it has in my case. And like I said, I got to the point where regardless of what happens in October, I know I'm going to be all right. And we're going to be all right as a family. And we will settle into whatever that new normal is after that.
I love that. I really appreciate that advice. I think that's great. And find your flow or create your flow. I think I really love that concept around that, because I think for everybody it's so unique and so different. So striving for somebody else's kind of direction is so much more challenging when you realize you do have your own, and you have your own motivation and your own journey.
Yeah. The other thing is, don't pay attention to what other people are doing. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's also the thing is when you look at, so I look at some of my friends from law school who I visit every now and then. And, I feel always really poor when I'm with them because they're doing such amazing things in their careers and, really making a lot of money right now, but they are all miserable. And that's the thing, so don't measure yourself by what other people are doing. Mm-hmm. Just be really happy with, as long as, your family's good, your relationships are good, your reward, in a rewarding, professional career path, that is all you need. And we should really not judge ourselves by what other people are doing. I know that's really hard, especially in the social media era, but, just really be centered in that. And, you'll feel a lot better once you put, block out all the noise.
Amazing. Okay, man. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Dan.
Again, everybody listening in, we wouldn't be here without you guys tuning in, hearing stories like Keanan's and understanding kind of where you guys, where you are in your journey and how to kind of evolve and grow. Lessons like Keanan's gone through are, dime a dozen, and they're so hard to find. And I really think, being able to share that with the community and being involved in the community is such a big thing. So thank you. 'Cause you do such a great job, Keanin. And at the end of this, we always ask ourselves a question: why not me? Why not now? All Keanin socials will be blasted all over this podcast. So check us out in the bio. Make sure you vote. I might know who I'm voting for. I'm not 100% yet, but he might be in the room. He might not. But no, go out there, vote Keanin. This guy, I've seen him make change. I've seen him create change, and the things that you're going to do for the city are amazing. So
thanks.
Really appreciate you kind of being the voice for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. I love that ending. Why not me? Why not now? That was my thought process for, doing this and making this leap from, again, being comfortable at the chamber to putting myself out there. And that's amazing that you, that's your tagline too.
That's it. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Boom.
Thanks, Dan.
That was awesome.
Yeah.